Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to this afternoon's presentation. I think we'll get started. We're about on time, so I don't think there's going to be any other joiners. So, first of all, my name is Jarrett Pharma. I'm the Operations Director for Aesica Pharmaceuticals, so very proud to be talking to you this afternoon. The subject that I'm going to talk to you about is a subject that's probably well known to everybody. It's a topic of conversation across the industry, serialization. The one thing I will tell you is this presentation isn't going to be a technical presentation on how to do serialization. So that is the first thing that I will say. So really what I'm going to talk about today is essentially in the CDMO space. So Aesica is a contract manufacturing business in the healthcare space, and I'm sure we're not faced with any other challenges as anybody else is in the industry. And one of the hardest jobs I've had is to answer this question to our executive team, our board of directors, around, is there a choice? Okay, I'm sure you've been faced with the same question. So, is there a choice? There is a choice. I guess the way I see it and the way our company sees it is, after much convincing to our executive team, it's like a ticket to the game. You're either in it, and if you've got a ticket, you can come into the game, or you're not, unfortunately. I think that's pretty much known now to everybody. There's a lot more knowledge about this topic in the industry. It's a legislation requirement, and it's a game changer. So I just want to reflect on some statistics. So I did a bit of research into the industry and been looking at what everybody else is doing around the industry. And there's some interesting facts. So in 2014, there was a survey done. And the interesting fact is that in terms of the market, what is everybody doing? So one of the things I found quite interesting was that 27% of the people who took part in this survey either haven't started looking at serialization yet, are in the early planning phases of serialization, or are looking for solutions. In my opinion, 53% of the respondents are probably already too late. And I think that may come as a surprise. I'm hoping that many of the people in this room aren't in that 53%. So I think, looking at sort of where we are as a business and looking at what's happening in the industry, looking at the things that are driven by market requirements and legislation, it was really important for us as a business to really look around and see what everybody else is doing, look at the timelines. It's very much timeline driven, this subject, and just to try and understand sort of how do we cater for the market requirements, how do we cater for what our customers need, and not just what our customers need, but what the regulators expect. So what is the solution? I guess the hardest thing I had to do was to convince our executive team that as a business with multiple packaging operations that had to be compliant with serialization, the first question I was asked was, well, is there a simple solution, and can we just use that solution and replicate it across every one of our sites? I guess in contract manufacturing, one of the difficulties and challenges that we have is that our customers want different things, and we're at the mercy of what our customers want. So no, there isn't one solution, unfortunately. There's many solutions, which is also great because it gives you at least some choice around how do you implement a solution. So the other thing that I was looking at was within serialization, there's a number of people who are looking to just take the big bang approach and really put full capability in place across all of their packaging operations and offer a full service to the customer base in terms of capabilities and serialization. I think whether you go for the full big bang approach or whether you take a phased approach depending on which markets come in line with the legislation change, there's always going to be operational challenges. And the way I see it is there's three essential operational challenges. There's a time issue, and this is very much time driven. We know that, right? There's legislation that's coming in force all the time. There's a cost issue, and I think as a CDMO, that's one of the things that is at the forefront of our mind, and we're going to come onto that in a second. And then there's the know-how, so the knowledge, and this was something that we had to do a lot of research on, working with our customers, working with our suppliers, and working with our internal assets to try and understand how do we take internal assets and provide capabilities to suit our customers and our market's needs. So I guess the big dilemma, and the big dilemma is the commercial aspect. Okay. So what is the commercial dilemma? The commercial dilemma is really, how do you fund this? It's not cheap. We know that it's a requirement. It's a ticket to the game, so you don't really have a choice. So you're faced with, how do you fund this operation and this exercise? And one of the things that we started to look at is, well, what is the typical ballpark in terms of funding for implementing a solution for serialization? And one of the things that we found was that there's a broad range of offerings out there. As you walk around CPHI, you'll find many solution providers that are offering different solutions for serialization, and it ranges from sort of 100,000 per line or per solution right up to the millions, and it depends on how much integration you want to do, how much capability you want to offer your customers in terms of the bare minimum, in terms of what's required now, or whether you want to go and implement a full track and trace solution. I guess the interesting thing was, it was around the survey that I looked at, and that was looking at how many people are anticipating what's going to happen in the future. And that anticipation, we're going through those same thought processes. So do we really go for the full serialization capability offering now across all of our operations, or do we just take it in a phased approach? And I think the interesting thing is if you look at the data, it's only a very small percentage of companies who are actually looking to go for the full Big Bang approach and be fully serialized within the next 6 to 12 months. So I guess there's almost a waiting game there to see what happens, to see how this evolves. The interesting thing was there's a biggest portion of the respondents in the data that I looked at were looking to put some serialization in, but on an as and when and needs basis. So what is the operational challenge? And I think, if you look at the biggest portion of what the data is telling us, the biggest portion of what operational challenges people are facing is taking existing assets and putting in serialization solutions. And I think you probably are faced with the same things. If you have packaging operations in your business right now, you're probably asking yourself the same question. How do we receive the data? How do we interface it using an ERP system with our business? How do we then take that data and apply that data on a packaging operation, on an asset that may be 10 years old, maybe 15 years old, maybe more than 15 years old? And that whole integration process and that whole utilization of existing assets is really probably the biggest operational challenge. And I think that's why when you look at what people are doing in the industry, there isn't one single solution. There's many solutions, and it depends on how you can integrate it onto existing assets and existing operational processes. So just to summarize this subject, I think the greatest concern that we have is in a CDMO space. And the reason I wanted to do this presentation was to really get it out and talk about this subject. It's a tough subject. Everybody knows that it's a game changer. I said that at the start. The cost element is a question mark. How much does it cost? How do you fund it? Who funds it? Those are the questions I got asked by the members of our board within Aesica. How do we keep the speed of manufacturing going? So one of the learnings that we had in the early phases of introducing serialization was we measure operational equipment effectiveness, as I'm sure many of you do in your businesses. And one of the things that we could not afford to do was to drop our overall efficiency on our packaging lines. And it's really hard when you start to integrate new solutions like serialization to maintain that same level of efficiency on your packaging operation. And then the knowledge and the know-how. So the knowledge and know-how comes from many sources, and there's lots of solution providers out there. As I said, there's lots of ways of doing serialization, but the knowledge and know-how in terms of your own business environment, your own assets, and how you roll out that solution is really critical. And then changing process. So there's a number of, we live in a very heavily regulated industry. So how you map out those changes and how you control those changes, super, super important. And we've tried to take a fairly standard approach in terms of how we make the change and how we roll those changes out. And then the cost of training. So this isn't to be underestimated. I think a number of people that I've spoken to in the industry think it's a pretty simple solution. You put you receive some serialized code, you basically put it onto a box and you track that data and you provide that data back to the customer or the market. The training shouldn't be underestimated. And then, of course, all the varying different requirements from the customers. And whether we like it or not, in a CDMO space, we have lots of customers and everybody has their own needs. So trying to cater for that is super important and one of the biggest challenges, actually, I think, for us. So I'm sure that you've probably been faced with some of these things yourselves, and really the whole purpose of me doing this presentation today was just to really talk about some of the challenges, talk about some of the things that we face as a business. And if any of you'd like to come and talk to me a little bit more about this, our stand is just literally over there, 100 yards in that direction. Really welcome anybody coming to have a chat and talk a little bit longer about this subject, because we're learning along with everybody else, and I'd love everybody to come and talk to me about it, because together we'll learn and we'll implement better solutions. So I'm going to end there. I'd just like to introduce my colleague, Paul Titley, who's going to cover a very different subject on a technical level. So if I can introduce Paul Titley.
Hello everybody. My name's Paul Titley. I'm Director of Business and Commercial Development for Aesica. I'm going to talk about LipoCeramic technology. Those of you expecting a whole series of graphic images on liposuction, I'm afraid that's a different haul on a different day. LipoCeramic. Did you think we'd run out of ideas, new ideas for BCS2 compounds? Well, if you stick around for the next 5 or 6 minutes, the answer is no. Like many technologies, they lurk in university departments unloved and unfound. And I discovered this one at the University of Adelaide last year, invented by Professor Clive Prestage, who's the Professor of Colloid and Pharmaceutical Sciences in the University of South Australia. And we've licensed this technology, and we're still going to be working with Clive, and the same way that we work with all of our technology that we find. We don't cut off links with the inventor. The inventor being part of the offer is what makes the offer so strong. So the background, just to remind you that we live in a world of pain. We live in a world of completely useless compounds in terms of their physio and chemical properties in order to help you make a decent dosage form. They might work in the clinic, but trying to formulate them is constantly difficult. And one of the most regular problems is they're insoluble. But some of them are insoluble but work well with a positive food effect. So if you can prescribe a packet of tablets and 28 beef burgers at the same time, that's potentially a way forward, but not very attractive. So you can see here this list of materials that you take them with food, the bioavailability increases. But it's not predictable. How long was the food taken? Was it taken with it, before it, after it? What type of food? Is fish and chips the same kind of food as an egg sandwich? What exactly do they mean by food? So not a very clever way of describing how to take a product when you're talking to the patient. So we're going to make LipoCeramic microparticles. And what we're going to do is we're going to harness that food effect, and we're going to create an on-board food effect with the API at all times. And I'll show you how we're going to do that in a moment. But crucially, having created this intimate mixture of oil and API, you can make it into tablets. Most of you would expect it to be an oily, mushy, pretty unattractive material, but you could actually make a dry powder. And that's what I think makes this so attractive. You're introducing an on-board positive food effect that you can fill as a dry material into capsules, and also as one of the ingredients in the tablet formulation. So we're going to first of all make a standard API and oil solution. Then we're going to make a rough emulsion, and then adding quite a bit of know-how, regular pharmaceutical processes and high pressure homogenization, and still using all the ingredients that you'd be familiar with. There's nothing new here. What is new is the way it's put together and the way the processes are combined. And so we manufacture increasingly smaller oily particles, and we coat them with silica. And so at one stage you've got a liquid which contains particles of silica in which are held droplets of oil, and in that oil is your API. And then we use a simple spray drying process to remove the carrier liquid, leaving you with a dry particle. And those dry particles, that's your API, pre-processed API, ready to go as a dry material for tableting or capsules. So, as is different on this particular presentation, we normally think, well, what would happen if we put it into people or animals? We think this might happen. This time I've actually got some data. So, here's some animal model data in rats, and as you can see for yourself, if you just have a straightforward aqueous emulsion, you don't get much happening. We're actually comparing the formulations. So the one on the right, the left-hand side is just aqueous suspension. Take that as a standard. Then if you make it as a lipid emulsion, you get a slight improvement. But if you use LipoCeramic technology, you get a massive improvement. And the same with indomethacin. If you just give it as a neat product, you can improve it with a lipid emulsion, and you can massively improve it as a LipoCeramic material. Now, LipoCeramic is protected by patents, so obviously there's a cost to get involved with that. So why not just stick with lipid emulsions? Well, fine, but lipid emulsions are not very attractive. Not many people don't want to carry them around all day. And also, they're not going to be that stable. What's going to happen to your emulsion when you see it in 6 or 7 or 12 months' time? So, if we look at the optimized fatty food effect, you start from the bottom, the black dot. You can see with celecoxib, you taken without food is pretty hopeless. You're getting almost no absorption at all. You feed 35 grams of fat at the same time to your dog, and you get a 2.9-fold increase in absorption. But if you give the drug in an oily solution, but no food, you get a 5-fold, because you've actually created a product there. You're not relying on the sort of, associated food being eaten at the same time. But if you go down the LipoCeramic route, and you've got a much more intimate on-board formulation, you've got a 6.5-fold increase in absorption. So it looks good for rats, so let's hear it for the rats, and it looks good for dogs. But what about people? Because that's us. So if you look at ibuprofen, and here we've got empty LipoCeramic, just to show that we have to sort of run a placebo arm. A commercial ibuprofen, and you can guess whose that was. Compared with LipoCeramic, you've got a massive improvement in absorption. But we've also halved the Tmax time. In the study, if you read a bit more in the paper, the Tmax of Nurofen was 2 hours, and the Tmax of LipoCeramic was 1.2 hours. So you have got a phenomenal improvement. And it's just waiting for you to turn up on our stand with the story of your poorly soluble API that actually is appropriate for this kind of technology, but it's not appropriate for all of them. And we'll show you how we can manufacture prototypes and then move forward into the clinic to demonstrate this kind of performance with your compound. So it's covered by patents. These patents are granted. And I think it covers all the geographic areas that are really important to us these days. So the overall summary, the benefits, we're building in an onboard food effect. It uses standard processing techniques. It's using GRAS and pharmacopoeia approved materials. There's nothing new here. It's know-how and patent-protected technology that enables this to be offered to you. But for me, the killer line when I was discussing this in Adelaide was you can make it as a dry powder, which I think makes it phenomenally useful because that's what we all do all the time. We've got factories the length and breadth of the planet making tablets and filling capsules. So ultimately, you're not being asked to change your final dosage form look. As far as the patient's concerned, it's just another tablet. You just happen to know it's got some terrific technology built in. Thank you for your time. You'll find me across the way.